Welcome to the Lit Marriage Podcast with authors and Christian relationship coaches Cassidy and Daniela Parlane. On this podcast, you will discover how to transform your marriage from autopilot mode to keeping the flame of purpose, passion, and romance lit in the marriage that God designed for you to have. Learn to love intentionally together. Are you ready to keep it lit? Here we go.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Lit Marriage Podcast. We are your hosts, Cassidy
and Daniela.
And today, Daniela, we're going to be talking about why we homeschool our children. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we hold dear to our hearts. Many of you out there that are listening, you probably are aware of the fact that we're homeschoolers, and maybe there are some new listeners out there who this is for your first time hearing this. And so, yeah, it's something that we have been doing ever since we got married and started our family with our first child. And now we have two little ones. We sort of missed the boat with our first child, my stepson, your child, Daniel. So we missed the boat on that one. But we've definitely seen the fruits of that, right? Yeah. We thank God that he brought Daniel through school, and Daniel actually finished school as a straight A student, and that's just totally
high school. Yes.
Yeah, that's totally the mercies of God, right? That's not the same story for many kids who've gone through the school system. And this is not a podcast bashing the public school system. What we are saying is
it's not
our
a blanket
preference.
Statement.
Absolutely not a blanket statement, but it is our preference to homeschool, and it is our choice. Yeah. And while we have that choice and the right to do so, and for as long as we have that, we want to exercise that. And
especially in light of a lot of the most recent events happening in the world, it's something to really consider and look at. Well,
as you mentioned, in light of the events, right? I mean, a lot of people actually they don't even have the option anymore.
Right.
School's been out since...
That's right. They've kind of been forced to homeschool.
Right.
All of a sudden.
So they've gotten a taste of what homeschooling sort of
looks like.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Maybe for some it's a good experience, and for others it's not so good. They're probably
culture shock.
Yeah, ripping their hair, ripping out their hair, and wanting the schools to reopen. So anyway, we want to start off today by talking from a biblical perspective why we homeschool our children. And we want to start with the verse from Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6 that tells us, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he's old, he will not depart from it. And we've heard that so many times, but that is the word of God. And how can we dispute the word of God? You might be listening and you're saying, how does this even relate to homeschooling? But we'll talk a little bit more about that further on down in our podcast. We have another scripture that we want to reference for you today, and that's Deuteronomy 11, 18 to 21. I won't read the whole scripture. I'll just read the first couple verses here for you that says, fix those words of mine on your hearts and minds. Tie them as a symbol on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on your door frames of your houses and on your gates. I mean, come on, when you think about it, that's the word of God that he's telling you to write them and bind them on your hearts, on your forehead, on your hands, whatever. In other words, so that you will never forget them. And there's something that that's something that we've done with our children, and we are seeing the fruits of that.
There's like a picture of just instilling these values. Right. It's a constant
reminder especially to your children, which is kind of difficult to do when they're absent from you most of the day.
Absolutely.
Whoever has the most of your child's time has the greatest impact on their heart and mind.
That is a true statement.
So true. Time is an investment. It creates bonds, which means more time equals more seeds sown. It's
right.
just common sense, right? Like Proverbs 4:23 even tells us, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And I believe this applies to our children's lives.
Absolutely.
Especially because they can't guard their own hearts when
right.
they're so little and tender. They need us to do it for them. So, when they're institutionalized all day, you don't really have much say or much control over what is being poured into their hearts and minds. So this is kind of one of the deciding factors for us why we chose to take control of our children's education ourselves.
Absolutely. Other religious groups out there have done it and are doing it today. For example, right. the Jewish community, they take full responsibility
right.
for the education of their children. Islam, or people who are in the Muslim faith, they take full responsibility for the education of their children's lives. So
a lot of them do, yes.
And for us as Christians as well, we have Christian schools out there, but I don't think it's enough. There needs to be more investments that are made into Christian education for our children. And you wonder why our children today are losing their faith like just crazy. Like they go to high school. It begins in high school. So that seed that we're talking about, right? Starts in high school, they go off to university or college, and all of a sudden they become either atheists or they become agnostics.
When you look at who has sown the most seeds over
right.
their lifetime, it's really the secular educational system. And there you have it. You hear stories from even pastors and
right.
religious leaders, like great spiritual leaders, who their own children have gone astray. And the
PK syndrome.
Yes, PK. We've all heard it, I'm sure. And
right.
you wonder why that happens. And oftentimes it's because, they may be saying, well, they were brought up in a Christian home all their lives. I've done my best. I don't know what happened to
right.
little Frankie. Well,
why are you going to have to talk about little Frankie?
Who's sown the most seeds in Frankie's heart and mind? If he's gone 8 hours a day,
right.
he's being
on average.
Right. It's just an example. We have to really think about that and consider what information is being put in these children's minds.
Right.
Who's really
has the greatest influence.
That's right.
Right. I want to talk to us today about some myths, right? Because there are so many myths. There's so many myths out there about homeschooling, and many of them are not very, I'd say, they're very negative.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's talk about those today. Okay. So number one, homeschooled children aren't socialized.
I think that must be the number one thing we hear.
Is that true though?
Not true. We'll get into that.
Wow.
We'll address these after.
Homeschooled children are shielded from the real world. I think that's something that we hear all the time. Oh, your kids need to experience the real world. And I don't know if that's something that's a need or if it's a must.
It has been determined that is a lie.
Homeschooled children aren't as educated and intelligent and can't go to college.
Wrong.
You have to be wealthy to homeschool. Is that true?
Absolutely not.
We're not wealthy.
We know a lot of people that aren't wealthy and they homeschool.
Homeschool kids are weird. We hear that all the time, right?
We do.
Aren't non-homeschoolers
quite the stereotype.
Weird as well?
I'd like to know if anyone has ever, in their own experience, not come across weirdos in their own, in the institutionalized system. Show me that first, and maybe I'll consider that there are no weird homeschooled kids.
Here's one that really, this is sort of an attack on parents who've chosen to take full responsibility for their kids' education. Homeschooling is a cover-up for child abuse.
Ouch.
That's just, what a slap in the face. When you're trying to like do the best for your child or children and give them everything that you know that God has placed in you and pass it down to them, and then someone comes out and say, oh, that's child abuse.
I think a lot of people think that perhaps it just provides an environment where child abuse can go unseen
Right.
or unreported, but you can see the same cases happening right under people's noses, and we'll get into that
Absolutely.
as well.
I just
We're
think
gonna
that,
break these myths.
I just think that that's such an insult for someone who's gone out of their way to really pour into their children, right? I'm not saying that these things don't happen. Because it's the exception.
It's a mass generalization.
It's not the rule.
That's right. Yep. Well, these are some things that homeschooling allows you the ability to do. It's kind of just answering to some of those myths that you just brought up. It teaches children strong biblical values and the problems with the secular societal structure. And here's another example of that. That was kind of a broad statement, but it protects them from what? What is this structure we're talking about?
Right.
The harmful, abusive, yes, I said abusive, and perverted sexual education curriculum that's being offered to children as early as kindergarten. And I'm speaking for mostly, North Americans. This is happening in the US and it's happening in Canada.
Right. And even in Europe as well. This is happening.
It's going worldwide in the Western world. These teachings are designed to reprogram and indoctrinate children into rejecting the biblical nuclear family structure and to normalize the immoral, dysfunctional sexual perversions of our time.
Wow.
Isn't that such a
slap in the face of God and His Word concerning how to raise our children? This is what the Bible tells us. Train your child. Train them in the way that they should grow, in the way they should go. And when they're old, they will not depart from it. This is why you find so much confusion in the minds and the hearts of our young people, our teenagers today, because the conflicting information that they're
being bombarded constantly with all these different ideas and ideologies.
Absolutely.
Another thing homeschooling does, at least we're speaking for our experience and how we choose to homeschool.
Right.
It shields them from the Darwinian teachings about how the cosmology came to be, which is specifically designed to remove God, the creator, out of the mind of society and to establish a world view that actually idolizes science.
Wow.
Right? And I think like the point you made earlier about kids, becoming atheists as soon as they reach high school and college, because by them, they've already been indoctrinated so deep and they've been taught from such a young age that faith and science are not compatible.
Right.
And that all this information of science is being sown into them at a young age. All these theories, which is what they are, they're not facts. They're being taught as facts.
Right.
As truth. And then, as a child grows up, they're going to eventually, they're going to start questioning their faith. And
again, there's nothing wrong with questioning one's faith, because it's also a sign of maturity. But when you're questioning your faith in the sense that you are totally in doubt of the foundational aspects of your faith, and even questioning the fundamentals.
Right.
Of your faith.
Because they're being told day in and day out, this is truth. The science we're teaching you is true. And when you go to church, once a week on Sunday, because that's usually the only time, unfortunately, parents haven't have the time to expose their children. That's the other issue, to actual moral teachings and biblical teaching, because they're so busy working and doing all these other things. And during the week, the children are in school. For most of the day, there's really very little time to actually teach them biblical principles. So that little amount of time that they're given in church or Sunday school is just not enough to build a solid foundation.
Yeah, you can depend on the youth leader.
So they're told that in school, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth, hammered into them. And then once a week, we give you a little story that comes across to the child as a fairy tale eventually. That's what they're told in school. This is a fairy tale you're taught in church.
I have a teacher, an ex-teacher, I guess, that actually said to me recently that the Bible is archaic, it's old, ancient, it's like has no relevance to today's world, and this is a recent occurrence, right?
Right.
I love this guy to death, but and he's a high school teacher of mine, and I want to say that out of respect, I actually inboxed him to really just to have a more respectful conversation, because I did not want to have that conversation on a public forum,
right.
Given that he was one of my best teachers growing up, my favorite, right? And so, like, think about it. I had no idea that this person had this type of ideology, and this was one of my favorite teachers.
Right.
So imagine the what our kids are having to contend with in today's society, and what they're having to press through, and even to hold on to their faith, right? I mean, everything that they're being taught, and the people who are teaching them,
that's right,
are not godly people. Most
right.
of them.
Their worldview is completely
absolutely
ingrained by it's influenced by a secular ideology, right?
Right.
An antichrist and ideology, really, if we're going to be plain and simple here.
And then we wonder when our kids come home and they're not the same kids that we sent off to school. It's like you teach your kids morals at home, and by the time they get home, it's like erased, and you're like, oh my goodness, I have to like reteach my child.
Exactly. It's like you have to undo everything that was put in them, and half the time you don't know what was put in them in the first place, because guess what? You're not there.
Wow.
Right?
The battle for the mind.
There is a battle over your children's mind. There is a spiritual battle always going on, and it has been intensifying because we're in the last days, and we talk about this a lot.
Right.
But, I want to address this point here where people claim, I think the number one thing I hear is that homeschool children are not socialized. Well, I think it's the complete opposite. I find that homeschool children are exposed to a richer and broader social range, in fact. In fact, people of different age groups and walks of life, rather than just a room full of their own peers.
That's interesting.
Right? And I think that really just helps children to get actually
more rounded
in communication. Our children will talk to anyone. They'll talk to older people, younger people. Like they don't feel like they can only communicate with little children like themselves.
Right.
So
and their vocabulary at their age,
they have a very wide vocabulary because of that.
Right.
Another thing that is just painfully obvious, I believe, right now and relevant is since COVID, the entire institutionalized educational system is being forced to social distance. Yeah. The impacts of children's emotional and social development will be unprecedented. Think about the impacts.
Well, we don't know.
When kids are, stuck in cubicles all day that are blocked off by, I'm seeing all these re-education videos about how school is going to be come September. Wash your hands as soon as you walk in. You have to, again, social distance, stay 6 feet apart. The desks are all separated. Some of them have like these glass dividers. The kids have to wear either masks or shields. I wonder what it's going to look like when they have recess time.
Yeah, that's going to be challenging.
You want to talk about, social problems?
That's going to be problematic.
It's probably your best bet.
When we were going to school, like recess, we looked forward to recess.
Yes, playing together. It's all about building those social skills and
we all shared germs. Okay,
exactly.
And there was nothing wrong with sharing germs. I'm talking just as kids, right? Kids touch things
what kids do.
Constantly.
It's in their nature.
And it helps us actually to build better antibodies and our immune system. Our immune systems become that much stronger. But not only are we raising a culture of kids that are going to probably not be healthy kids, but also like a physical health, but also mental, emotional health. That could really do something for a child's health, mental health, because we're social beings.
We are
as human beings. And you see that with our kids, right? Like, they can't help but just, they see other kids in the playground. They just want to go and play. They might not know those kids, but they always just want to go over and just build a friendship or go over and talk or just play.
That's right.
So imagine what that's going to do over time.
That's
we
right.
have
no idea because it hasn't been done, but I'm imagining it's not going to be a good
it can't
step
be
in
positive.
the right direction. Not to mention that homeschooling exposes them to the real world around them and frees them from the constraints of the cement room. Being in this enclosure all day long and, this very stringent structure. Whereas with homeschooling, I mean, we take our kids out for, hands-on hiking, road trips and things like that. So it exposes them to our day-to-day routine. They go grocery shopping with us. We go for walks, whatever we're doing. And it offers you the opportunity to teach them things.
And it gets them away from group think as well.
Absolutely.
Because groupthink is actually one of the most dangerous things that you can do for your kids. When your kids are thinking the exact same way as everybody in that cement
like this
herd
mentality.
That's pretty dangerous as well, because now your kids aren't being taught how to have a mind of their own, and they're not being taught how to
critical
look
thinking
at
skills are so lacking.
Stifled.
And I think it's obvious when you just look at your social media timelines. I think a lot of the adults we have today are a result of the indoctrination that's happened in public schools, especially. You're taught what to think, not how to think.
Absolutely.
And it's so important that we teach our children those things.
To be free thinkers.
And yes, we're talking about giving them the information we want them to learn.
Right.
But at the same time, we're responsible to make sure that we allow our children to develop
their own ability.
To think and to ask questions without having to have like, this is the way what the school's teaching and there's no way around it. It's just this way. Right. So that gives you that opportunity. And I want to also address the one thing about the abuse, because that one personally offends me. Right. Because I think you and I have our own personal experiences with abuse in school. My oldest son as well has a history with abuse in school, and we were not homeschooled. So, I mean, I suffered as a child with an extremely debilitating anxiety disorder called selective mutism. And actually what triggered it, ironically enough, was the school system itself, because it's an anxiety disorder that comes on in certain social environments. And I believe I just felt so overwhelmed by being in this completely different environment from the home that just triggered it. And it just caused my anxiety to go to an overwhelming degree. And what a result of that was so much abuse for years of my life because I didn't speak in school. So you can imagine, children would come up to me and physically abuse me, and they knew that there were no repercussions or consequences for them because Daniela wasn't going to speak about it.
You mean the Daniela that we can't stop from talking today?
The one that won't stop talking
Lord,
now.
She's been delivered.
I've been delivered. Hallelujah. Yes, all the glory goes to Jesus for that. But the point is, I endured a lot of abuse emotionally and physically. Right. And even psychologically, because I felt like I was a freak. I was told that every single day of my life. I was weird. You're not the same. And I would hear people even talking about me in front of me. People would come and, there was a girl that every single chance she got, she would like lock me up in the girls' bathroom.
Really?
And tell me that if I didn't cry, she would like beat me up. I could go on and on. There was so much abuse I endured, and it was endured in silence because I wouldn't speak because of this anxiety disorder and tell anybody. So there's that. There's also my oldest son, who's now 18. He was bullied all throughout from daycare.
Wow.
All throughout up until middle school or so. And there were things, I fought for this boy. I went to so many meetings. with teachers. There was so much abuse that would happen that would go completely unseen. I'm saying this kid would come home with like stab marks from pencils and rulers, and nobody knew about it. I'd go to the school and report it, and we didn't see it happen.
Wow.
So therefore, don't, when you talk about abuse happening in the home, yes, we're not going to ignore the fact that some parents are abusive, and maybe some of them do cover up abuse by homeschooling their children under the guise of homeschooling. But let's talk about the bullying that happens in schools right under, the view of, one teacher can't possibly see everything that's going on when there are like 20 or more children in the classroom.
Exactly.
And then what happens at recess, after school, before school.
Right.
There is so much. There is a huge problem with suicides in school as well, because of a result of this bullying and violence.
Absolutely.
And you have your own experience as well.
Yeah, for me, like I was a new immigrant, and I was made fun of my clothes, the way I dressed, the way I spoke, the way I carried myself, my mannerism.
What about your faith?
Which is exactly ties to my mannerism. Like I never, I wasn't someone who swore when I was in school. Like swearing is just not something that I was taught growing up. I didn't hear it in our home. Right. So it's not something that just sort of flies out of my mouth like a trucker, right? As opposed to some kids that I grew up around in school, like they would just swear off the handle, like, and you're wondering, like, where are your parents? Do you kiss your mom with the same mouth, right? And so, like, I would be ostracized because I didn't speak the same way. I didn't carry myself the same way. I was called every single name in the book.
Wow.
I was told that I was I was called a homo. I was called this. I mean, those are like offensive words, even today, right? Like I was called all sorts of names, but I endured. My faith was totally just ridiculed.
Thankfully, it was strong enough that
exactly.
You made it through, but
I had a
struggle was
personal
real.
relationship with God, and that was what carried me through school. And for those of you who are listening and you're thinking, are these two like just off the handle or something, like homeschooling over public school? Like really? For us, we're going to say that it is everyone's choice how they raise their family, and it is not it's not okay for anyone to judge or persecute another person based on what their choices are for how they raise their families, right? And nor should you sit there and allow a person to do that to you without standing up for yourself and knowing that this is something that you're doing for the benefit of your family, for your children's and their future, right? So for me, like, I just would love to encourage those of you like who are out there. You're saying, well, I went to public school and I came out fine. See, you're the exception, you're not the rule. Okay, I'm the exception, I'm not the rule. Daniela is the exception, she's not the rule. We've all had our struggles through high school. It has affected us in different ways. We all have our stories, right? You've heard mine, you've heard a little of Daniela's as well, but I just want to say that these are real things, but it's a slap in the face for someone to say that homeschooling is an abuse towards children. That's just not a reality at all in many cases.
I wanted to also address the fact that homeschooling provides children with the opportunity to learn by example.
Absolutely.
Right? By being around their parents, which allows them to emulate their parents' hopefully godly behavior. Because it can really go both ways. If you have a nasty attitude, that's what they're going to emulate. But we're obviously encouraging godly homeschooling, godly lifestyles.
Right.
So this gets instilled. The best way children learn is always by example.
Children live.
They have
what
to
they
see.
Learn.
That's right. They live what they learn. They live what they see.
Absolutely.
What they're surrounded by. So think about how this can happen negatively, even in the educational system, in the institutionalized system. When you were just mentioning, you hear swearing every minute of the day and now it's just getting worse, right? The different, you're bombarded with this pluralistic idea of what life is all about, like all these different ideologies being thrown at you. All these things get absorbed into a child's mind and heart.
And it's what shaped them.
And exactly, that's going to shape them. They need to be shaped by a good, strong, godly example.
Absolutely.
And as they get older, because people like to use the argument that that's sheltering them, and then, but when they get older, they're not going to know. They're going to have this culture shock when they find out, what the world is all about. Not necessarily. Again, if you shelter them from it, yes. But when they're so tender, that's when you have to plant the seed.
Absolutely.
And then you also teach them when age appropriate about all the negative influences of the world. And you're showing them right from wrong. Somebody has to be there to arbitrarily teach them right from wrong. They're not going to automatically be able to separate in their minds right from wrong when they're that tender.
And the thing is, our school empowers kids to make their own decision at the young age that they're at.
Children don't understand sin, and they're not taught that sin is even a thing.
Right, exactly.
They're taught that truth is relative.
Right.
Good and evil are pretty much relative. It's according to whatever you decide is good or evil these days.
Exactly.
Another one that I found funny was like some homeschool children or how typically they're weird.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I guess you'd have to define weird, but I don't know about you, but when I was in public school, there were some pretty weird people in there. Pretty weird kids. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's always the weirdo. I was the weirdo
and they're in their groups, like they're different groups,
cliques.
And like the different cliques, and just sitting back in the thing is, you could be looking at these weird kids and saying, man, they're weird, and they're looking at you saying that you're weird. So that's perception is something, isn't it?
It's relative, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I wanted to mention this as well. This is for all those people who believe that homeschooling children are not as intelligent or can't pursue college. Well, the right kind of homeschooling can give students an edge over their peers at public school, according to a new study in the Canadian Journal of Behavioral Science, which was in an article entitled "Canadian Study Finds That Homeschooled Kids Are Smarter Than Public School Kids."
Wow.
And in addition to that, research suggests homeschool children tend to do better on standardized tests, stick around longer in college, and do better once they're enrolled.
Wow,
a 2009 study showed that the proportion of homeschoolers who graduated from college was about 67%, while among public school students it was 59%.
Interesting.
So that just blows that myth right out of the water. Homeschool children are not undereducated or not, their IQs are actually higher.
One of the things that I've seen with homeschoolers is that they have a level of discipline that you don't see with public school kids. Mm-hmm. There's a level of concentration, and the ability,
independent study, and they take initiative because that's, again, it's molded into them to take the initiative.
Absolutely.
To work. They get to work at their own pace. Everybody learns differently. It's not this cookie cutter method of everybody kind of going around the same curriculum.
And you get to pull the leadership abilities out of them, absolutely, out of homeschoolers more, yes. Because they're more sort of attentive to getting what you're saying to them as a parent. And the things that you're instilling in them. We're not saying that there aren't homeschoolers out there who have sort of defied this rule, or they've gotten outside of what you would call the successful method of homeschooling. Like people are people,
exactly,
right? But the rates
speak for themselves.
The numbers
speak for themselves.
Absolutely.
Also, there's that myth that you need to be wealthy in order to homeschool. You do not need to be wealthy. Okay, it might take a little financial sacrifice. I'll say that. And again, this is not a blanket statement. It's not like you must homeschool or you're a bad parent. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying that it is possible, and not for maybe in your situation at this moment, it's not possible, and that's okay too. But you know what? For those that can make that little financial sacrifice,
and it is truly a sacrifice.
It is. It's worth it though, because your children are the most important investment.
Absolutely.
They are souls.
Absolutely.
And God will hold us accountable for these souls. And this was the driving force for why we chose to take full control over our children's education.
Absolutely. Wow.
So, yeah. I mean, we wanted to mention as well that, you know, especially in our case, there are different streams of income that you could look into.
Right.
You know, you're typically thinking, oh, well, I can't afford it. Both parents have to be working in order to do this. And like, how are we going to homeschool when the parents are working? Well, it's possible to have, like in our case, we even have, I mean, we coach, we do relationship coaching together, and we kind of work around our children's waking and sleeping schedule to do that. Right. There's also, for instance, we have a line of health products that we sell. So that's another example.
Right,
and
so
most of this can be done virtually, online, or you kind of make your own hours. There are different, you know, there are possibilities and opportunities, especially this day and age, more than there ever has been.
Right.
Like the world has just gone online for the last 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
Hello. There are online opportunities more than there ever have been.
Exactly.
So it's, if you really want, what I'll say is this, if you really wanted to do this,
it can be done.
It can be done.
Absolutely.
It doesn't come without sacrifice.
Absolutely.
But that sacrifice
be worth it.
Is worth it. Absolutely.
Yes, I agree.
Totally.
Well, we hope that today's discussion was thought-provoking, edifying. And, you know, if you have any questions on how to proceed with homeschooling, I mean, please feel free to reach out to us. We are more than open and available to speaking to you. However, one of the most important things that I want to say to our listeners today is that there can be a little bit of there needs to be a lot of agreement.
Absolutely.
Between your spouse and yourself.
That is the most important thing.
You got to agree.
Because the marriage is the foundation.
Absolutely.
And if you don't agree there, you're going to have problems everywhere else.
So mom can't want to homeschool and dad saying, that's not going to happen. Mom needs to go and work.
To be on the same page.
Dad wants to homeschool and mom says, can't do that. You got to go. You know what I mean? Like there has to be some level
cohesion
of understanding and agreement in order to do this. And I really believe that Christians can really pull their families together, especially in days and times like these that we're living in, and allow your home to be a place where God dwells, and that his word is written and bound to your arms and to your foreheads, and that you can raise your children in a God-fearing home, a God-centered home. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, keep it
lit.
God bless you.